Welcome back. You made it to part three. I'm so proud of you. This part of chapter five is all about elevating your energy into the brain. So, Dr. Joe Dispenza explains how, when your energy moves from the body's lower centers to the brain, we experience a shift in consciousness. This is where intuition awakens, creativity flows, and we begin to feel connected to something greater than ourselves. It's also how we break the habit of being who we've always been and we start becoming who we were meant to be. He also wrote a book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, but this is the seat of those teachings as well. So evolving the energy to the brain. Once this energy becomes activated, the sympathetic nervous system, a subsystem of your autonomic nervous system that arouses the brain and body in response to a threat in your outer environment, turns on and energy begins to move from the body's lower three energy centers to the brain. But instead of the body being aroused because of some external condition, you are turning on the sympathetic nervous system by passionately engaging the breath from within. As the sympathetic nervous system starts to merge with the parasympathetic nervous system, another subset of your autonomic nervous system that relaxes your brain and body, such as after a big meal, it is as if traveling energy from the lower centers is ejaculated into the brain. When this energy reaches the brainstem, a gate called the thalamic gate opens up, and all that energy is permitted to enter the brain. Once this energy that was initially stored in the body centers, stored in the body enters the brain produces gamma brainwave patterns. I'm going to pause there because this is the first time that I'm reading this that I realized that instead of just allowing yourself to go deeper into meditation and slowing your brain waves down, he's teaching that by doing this breath technique, you kind of like accelerate the process of getting into gamma brain waves. Because, right, first you're in beta, which is your analytical mind, then you're in alpha, and you slow that down further, you go to theta, and you slow that down further, and you go into gamma, which is where people have a lot of mystical experiences. So now I'm understanding that just doing the breath can put you in a state of gamma brainwave patterns. That's a bar. He says, we've recorded many students producing gamma brainwaves during this breathing technique. Gamma brainwaves, which I call super consciousness, are notable not only because they produce the highest amount of energy of all brainwaves, but also because the energy comes from within the body instead of being released in reaction to a stimulus in the environment and outer world. In contrast, the brain produces high range beta brainwaves when the body releases stress hormones, allowing you to be super alert to danger in your environment. In beta, the outer world seems more real than your inner world, while in gamma waves create a similar type of arousal in the brain, which then causes a heightened sense of awareness, consciousness, attention, and energy related to more creative, transcendental, or mystical experiences. The difference is that in gamma, whatever is happening in your inner world becomes much more real to you than many experiences you've had in your outer world. We're going to take a look at figure 5.12 to review how similar beta and gamma brainwaves are. So it's so funny because ayahuasca, I think I'm saying it right, is like a substance, like a shroom or something that people take to have these mystical experiences like past life regression or just like psychedelics that they take. And from what I'm understanding, and I think I've read this before too, that just by doing this breath, you can induce a similar state of consciousness, which is wild because I've heard people on his testimonials talk about how they don't need to take shrooms or smoke marijuana or do different things to put themselves in induced states like that anymore because they understand how to do this work. So very interesting and fascinating. Many of our students who do this breath technique produce significant high beta brain waves on their way to the gamma range, the highest frequency brain waves. Or they may simply stay in they may simply stay in these very high level beta states. We're finding that being in the highest level of beta can also signal that person is paying more attention to their inner world than their outer world. In addition to seeing more energy in the brain after this breathing technique, We have also repeatedly observed more significant amounts of brain coherence. Take a look at graphics 6A and 6B in the color insert. You can see two students who have done the breath successfully. They have very high frequency beta brain waves that transition to gamma brain waves. Notice the high amplitudes of their brain waves in gamma. The higher the amplitudes, the higher the energy in their brains. The students demonstrate 160 to 260 standard deviations above typical gamma brain waves. To give you reference, 3 standard deviations above normal is usually considered high. In graphic 6A4, you can also witness much more brain coherence after the breath. The red patterns in the brain show extremely high amounts of brain coherence in every measured brainwave state. And as you do this powerful breathing technique, you are drawing the energy that has been stored in those lower three centers, the energy you use for orgasm and to make a baby, to digest a meal, or to run from a predator. And instead of releasing it out into chemistry, you're going to draw it up your spine like you would draw fluid up a straw and release it into your brain. In fact, there's a tube of energy or light called the prana tube running alongside your spinal column. See figure 5.13. He has a lot of figures in here. I'll show you this. Yeah, that's the prana tube that he's talking about. He says yogis have known about this tube. Yeah, the people who are yogis, which is not a physical structure but an energetic one for thousands of years. Yeah. This tube is considered etheric because of the electrical information in the spine that constantly moves through it. The more energy moves in the physical spinal cord, the more energy is created as light in this tube. And the more energy created in this tube, the more energy moves in the spine and the greater the expression of life. Sometimes when I teach this meditation, people will say to me, I don't really feel my prana tube. Well, you don't really feel your left ear either until you put your attention on it, right? So when I ask you to contract your muscles and pull that energy up, you'll be pulling it up through the spine and creating a more powerful prana tube along your spinal cord. It's important to add here that this is not a passive breath. It's an extremely active, passionate process. Moving this stored energy that has been stored for years and years, maybe even decades, takes an act of intention and will. To evolve your limited survival emotions, as an alchemist turns base metals like lead into gold, you are taking self limiting emotions like anger, frustration, guilt, suffering, grief, and fear, and turning them into elevated emotions such as love, gratitude, and joy. Other, el- Other elevated emotions to consider tapping into include inspiration, excitement, enthusiasm, fascination, awe, wonder, appreciation, kindness, abundance, compassion, empowerment, nobility, honor, invincibility, uncompromising will, strength, and freedom, not to mention divinity itself, being moved by the Spirit, trusting in the unknown, or in the mystic or the healer within you. By the way, I do want to add that he's absolutely right about this not being a passive breath. So if you find yourself learning about this or seeing different videos across the internet, when you're doing the breath in the meditation, it's very passionate and intense because you want to think about it as this energy has been stuck, like he said, for years and years, maybe even decades. And you want to get it moving again. So you're going to have to squeeze with an intensity. I'm talking about like, ugh, like you really going to go there, right? Like I'm not talking about when you constipated on the toilet. I'm talking about even beyond that. You really want to have an uncompromising will to know that you're really moving that energy up. So, yeah, you'll see some videos online that'll talk about it too. Remember, evolving this energy takes a level of intensity, see that, that is greater than the body as the mind, greater than your addiction to any survival emotion. You must be inspired to become more energy than matter, using your body as an instrument of consciousness to ascend your energy. So don't let your body be your mind. Don't let your body tell you, oh no, you're doing it too hard, or, just breathe a little bit. This is uncomfortable. Like, no. Remember that you are liberating stuck energy. You're turning guilt or suffering or anger or aggression into pure energy. And as the body liberates that energy, you're freeing yourself and you will feel overjoyed, in love with life, and inspired to be alive. That is the result of getting this energy unstuck in these lower centers. As you pull this energy up the spine in this meditation, you'll follow your breath all the way up to the top of your head. When it gets there, I want you to hold your breath while you keep squeezing those muscles in your perineum and your abdomen. When you do that, you increase the pressure inside your spinal cord and your spinal column. A lot of people talk about that pressure being so intense that they feel like they might pass out, and that's actually a good thing. That pressure, called in, intra intrathecal pressure, is inside a closed system. It's the same pressure you exert when you take a breath and lift something heavy. You're pushing against your insides. But in this breath, you'll be very specifically directing all that pressure, all that energy, and all that spinal fluid up your spine and into your brain. So you're being intentional about the pressure, the amount of pressure, and where you're sending it. When that pressurized fluid reaches the back of your brainstem, all of a sudden the lower brain centers like the brain stem, cerebellum, and the limbic brain open up to this energy through a cluster of nuclei called the reticular formation. That energy passes through the thalamic gate, up the thalamus, the part of the brain that relays signals from sensory receptors located in the midbrain, which serves as a junction box. Next, all of the stored energy moves directly into your higher brain center, the neocortex. That's when gamma waves begin to occur. When the energy reaches the thalamus, it's also relayed to the pineal gland, and something amazing happens. The gland, that gland releases some very powerful elixirs, one of which, an, one of which anesthetizes, I don't even know how to say that, the analytical mind and thinking brain. I think it's like anesthetizes, anesthetizes. I can't even say that. Sorry, y'all. See figure 5.14, which shows the thalamus, the reticular formation, and the thalamic gate, and the moment of energy hitting the higher brain centers. We'll talk more about the pineal gland in a later chapter, but for right now, know that when that happens, it's like an orgasm in your head. And I can say, I don't know that I've really hit a huge stride in reconditioning the body to a new mind meditation, but I do know that when I really am intense with my breath and I go there and I liberate energy in those lower centers, I do feel a release. And it is comparable to like an orgasm. But again, I don't know that I've hit like a really, really high peak with that. So that's why I'm continuing to evolve my practice and going back to the basics. He says, this is a very powerful energy that has been called the movement of the Kundalini. I told you guys this before. I personally don't like to use that word because it might conjure up opinions or beliefs from a limited understanding of this energy that may discourage some people from doing the breath. And I can attest to this. He says, but I do want you to understand that this is the energy you are evoking with this breath. I wanted to speak to this part because, and I'm going to talk more about it in my live on Tuesday, but a lot of people have beliefs around certain things that are tied to certain religious practices or spiritual practices based on those religions or spiritual practices. And part of what Joe is trying to get people to understand is that when you remove those limitations of how you're seeing these constructs and you study the science of it and see what it actually does and how it actually works from a scientific standpoint, you'll be less limited in your perspective. You'll be less inclined to have those limited views, and you'll be more open to understanding like, hey, I can really work with this and do something that's really powerful to help myself, to help my body release what it needs to release. So he says, if you look at graphic 6b4 in the color insert, you can see the area surrounding the pineal gland is quite active in the student producing gamma brain waves. Look at the blue arrows. The red area suggests the activation of energy in the pineal gland, as well as the region of the limbic brain associated with strong emotions and formation of new memories. Graphic 6b5 is a three-dimensional picture of the same student's brain. Once again, The pineal area shows a significant amount of energy coming from inside the brain. I'm actually going to turn to these graphics because he does have color inserts in, he says graphics 6B. All right, he has them in order, so let's see what he got. So these are the different graphics that he's talking about in this chapter. See why I can't do this all the time, because the lighting changes. But he backs it up with data, y'all. So definitely get the book if you want to be able to see those graphics a lot better and study them if you're a super analytical person. But this wraps up part 3. And if your life has been feeling repetitive, predictable, or emotionally draining, this part explains why. And even more beautifully, it shows us what's possible when we reclaim our energy and move it upward. In part 4, we'll explore how embracing elevated emotions begins to rewire our emotions. I'm sorry, begins to rewire our reality and our emotions. You won't want to miss this part. So definitely stay tuned for part 4, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.